And now we are live. Wonderful. We have made it. We have the eagle has landed. Thanks, Mark. Well, hello, everybody. We may be having some people join us tonight. In fact, I've got the wrong thing plugged in the wrong place. There we go. Now we might have some people joining us. I'm so very sorry for the technical problems. Whenever we switch anything or do anything, there's always some new technical difficulties that come up with that. And in fact, I need to sign in to YouTube here because I went out and then I went back in and now I got to get straightened out here. So I'm sorry for the confusion. Tonight, I wanted to do some discussion about going no contact and narcissism. Let me get this set up. I don't know why we always have such difficulties here. There we go. Now there should be live. And I go live and there should be, there we go. Now we have, and now I can see the stream. Again, I apologize for the confusion. I hope you will bear with me and be patient. Well, you have been patient so far, and I'm sure some people have wondered what in the world's been going on. This is the Family Tree Brand Life Coaches live broadcast. And Mark has been gracious enough to allow me to do some live programs. And tonight, that's what I'd like to do. I've got some material I'd like to present, which I hope will be a help for folks. I do see the live stream, which I'm responsible for here tonight. So I may be looking over to my right to see the questions and the those kinds of things. I would ask, if you're going to ask a question, please put in capital letters question and then write, and I hope that you will offer a brief question, not a long one tonight, because I'm going to have a harder time kind of managing both. So I hope you'll be patient with me. And I see KW is here, is ready to help, and I appreciate that. Sometimes we have some trolls or folks that want to join us, and it's nice to have some of our wrenches here where we can help take care of that, and I don't have to monitor what's going on in that regard. I don't know why people enjoy doing those kinds of things like trolling and stuff like that, but I suppose no different than why people do lots of things that they shouldn't do, that are not helpful to other people. I've been working on a video, and so KW is Kelly. I think that's Kelly Wood, I believe. I've been working on a video about these topics: narcissism and going no contact. Also, the silent treatment, emotional cutoff, limited contact or low contact. And this video, I'm going to try to explain those concepts to folks so that they can get a better understanding of what I mean by those things. coming from a marriage and family perspective, an addictions perspective, a narcissism, abuse perspective, and coming from those perspectives to share what some of those things mean. Because I think silent treatment, emotional cutoff, no contact, and limited contact are all different concepts. And I think talking about those could be a help to folks. Tonight, I'd like to share some things regarding going no contact. And many of you have experienced narcissistic abuse, and not only from spouses, partners, friends, pastors, bosses, parents, siblings, extended family. And I've worked with adult children of narcissists for several years now, and worked with ACOAs and adult children of dysfunctional families for decades now. And how damaging narcissism in the family, in the workplace, in the church, in the synagogue, in the mosque. And I've worked with people who are, in the mosque, in the church, in the synagogue, and it doesn't matter, there are narcissists everywhere. And they are very damaging, and they really do wreak havoc on the whole family. Not only do narcissists wreak havoc on the whole family, they wreak havoc on generations. And that's where we want to fight that generational legacy that is left by them, which is very painful, very hurtful, and in fact, it's something in which that's kind of in us for the rest of our lives. I believe people can recover and come to a place where they are feeling much more comfortable with themselves, much more stabilized, much more able to be calm and non-reactive, have lowered guilt, lowered shame, lowered triggering of CPTSD from narcissistic abuse by parents and siblings and family members. But it is a generational problem. It really does spread through the generations. And what's I think interesting is a lot of people may not realize that, let's say we have a great grandparent who was really narcissistic and toxic. Well, maybe the next generation was not as toxic or as painful. Then the next generation might be a little less toxic or painful or pained. But we have 3 generations coming down to the 4th generation, which might be me and my generation. And I'm still affected because of my family, because of the great-grandparent narcissist. It reverberates through the generations. And people go, well, how can we stop that? How can we? And that's where I talked about those emotional circuit breakers. Not only do we have emotional circuit breakers between you and me, or within a system or within a relationship, we also want to do our work of self-differentiation so we have intergenerational emotional circuit breakers. I want to be able to stop the damage as much as possible with me. I don't want it to continue to flow on over to other generations. And so I think it's important that we stop the damage with us. And when you say, well, how do you stop the damage? You get into recovery. You begin to work to detach from the narcissist, to differentiate from the narcissistic family. And then, if we cannot differentiate from the narcissistic family, or the family only continues to abuse us while we are differentiating, then Then we have the need for going no contact. I do see a question, and Annie, thank you for the question. I do want to say, be sure to capitalize question when you ask a question. That will help me notice it more. But Annie, I see the question. I'm trying to understand what is considered a healthy amount of narcissism. Does such a thing exist? Well, that's an interesting. I mean, developmentally, a toddler has a certain amount of narcissism, if you want to call it that. Again, narcissism is an adult term for an adult psyche and an adult temperament and personality. Much like if you say, and we're very careful about labeling children, for example, can a 6-year-old be a sociopath? And I have a hard time with saying a 6-year-old can be a sociopath. Now, can a 6-year-old do traits and have experiences that seem like they have no empathy and they, terrorize animals? And, yes, they can do that in extreme cases. But most of the time we try to hold off those terms for later in life because a child is developing and that they haven't, if you haven't developed and matured, how can you be fully something yet? Sociopathic, narcissistic, if you haven't developed to that. You could call an infant narcissistic because who's the infant worried about? Only themselves. And they don't care what effect, they don't have other empathy for anybody else. But we wouldn't call them narcissistic. We would call them dependent. And they are dependent on us and they have not developed and all they have are needs. But we wouldn't call them narcissistic, but you could use narcissistic traits and words for that. But we wouldn't do that for children. And so when we talk about can you have a healthy amount of narcissism, I think can you have a healthy amount of self? Can you have a healthy amount of self-concern? Can you have a healthy amount of self-worth, excuse me, and self-acceptance and self-confidence? Yes, I think you can have a healthy amount of all of that. When you say, can you have a healthy amount of narcissism, I guess that's where I get a little, I don't talk about healthy narcissism. And I think Jill again, I see, says, yeah, self-esteem versus narcissism. And I think having a healthy sense of self and a strong, confident self, though doesn't seem like it rises to the level of narcissism. Though people have written different works about narcissism and how they've applied it. And some do talk about you can have, and I believe, and I remember I was listening to a great psychologist who was talking about CPTSD, and she really gave some really good explanations of CPTSD and what it means. And I love her term where she says PTSD, or at least this was my example of it, PTSD is an acute trauma. CPTSD is accumulated chronic trauma. CPTSD is trauma that you're marinated in. PTSD is trauma you have been shocked or have an acute trauma that has happened to you. One is marination and one is acute. And I like the way she described it. But she talked about, in understanding human beings and the experience of being human is almost always on a continuum. It's not either or, it's not black or white. It's almost always on a continuum. Whether that be happiness, sadness, depression, narcissism, almost anything that's a human experience can have a continuum to it. And so she was talking about this continuum. And so if you talk about a small amount of narcissism, I think that probably would cause fewer problems. Maybe the person would make social missteps. The person would not be not be as empathetic as some other people. And so they might miss some cues in that way. But they're not extremely narcissistic, where they just malignantly are narcissistic. And so I think those kinds of things exist. That's why when people say, well, I have a narcissistic mother-in-law, so should I talk about, should I go no contact with her? And I'm going, well, it depends on what the severity of the narcissism is and what's happening and what's the effect on you. Because I can be around some narcissists and I'm not affected much by them at all. But if I'm very affected by them, then that makes a big difference. And if I'm very affected by a low-level narcissist, that can make a big difference too. So I think it depends on what our experience is with that narcissist. Rather than if a narcissist is a 5A, B, C, K-7 narcissist, then therefore I should go no contact. Well, I wish it were just that simple and we could just give a test. However, tonight I do want to share some criteria that would in fact, I think, help us to kind of determine about going no contact. And no contact is a very serious, significant, and important act to choose. No different than choosing a divorce. A divorce is a very serious decision to make. Getting married is a very serious decision to make. Going no contact is a very serious decision to make. And then I see a question here. It says, is no contact with mother appropriate? I'm 64 years old. And I shake just thinking of her. And I want to talk about when, and I am talking about almost going going no contact with virtually anyone. Friend, church, pastor, family, siblings, parents, job, boss. I mean, there's lots of folks and situations that probably no contact would be appropriate. Now, it's very hard to go no contact with the boss if you're working for them. But again, we can work to try to change jobs. And we can try to move our lives away from someone who's toxic in that way. Let me take a look here. I wanted to, and if I have time to talk about some other things. So getting back to the question about is there a healthy level of narcissism, I don't know. I think there's self-esteem and all those things. Narcissism is a term used to describe a pathology. So it's harder for me to say healthy narcissism unless you're going to call a 2-year-old having healthy narcissism. Now that would be okay. Because, and even a teenager goes through a period of what would be considered developmental narcissism, just as a 2-year-old would have some developmental narcissism. And we don't consider that damaging or problematic. That's a normal part of developing, to develop oneself into a self. But I think if you're talking about adults, I'm not really trying to, have some narcissism. I would like self-confidence, self-acceptance, self-love, self-esteem. I would like all those. Narcissism, I'm not so sure. But you can have a smaller amount of that, and I don't think it has to ruin your whole life or ruin everybody around you. So, but I think extreme levels of those, then it really messes up folks, generations, marriages, kids. And I'm working with some families now that it just reeks, or excuse me, it, what do I want to say? It's affecting the whole family. And not only is it affecting the family, in one instance, it's affecting this entire medical practice because dad's the narcissist and daughter is daughter and son are in the practice. Then there's some other partners. It's just a holy mess because of the narcissism. And it's just really messes with everybody's families and they take it home with them. Dad's doing some really crazy things. He ignores how it affects other people, and he just continues to hurt. He's divorced, and he's ends up mistreating and financially abusing his ex-wife, who is the daughter's mother, and it's just destroys everybody, and it's very painful, and I think that's where, if at all possible, no contact might be an appropriate response. Let's see if the I don't know what that. Let's talk about some of the signs you need to go signs you need to go no contact with your family. And again, coming from a marriage and family therapy and theory background, the rules are, and in fact, I might share with you, a lot of people don't understand why some therapists will be hesitant about that, about recommending no contact, because they realize that if you combine no contact with emotional cutoff, that, as in this book entitled Emotional Cutoff by Peter Titleman, which is a great book. Again, it's more for clinicians, but still other people can benefit from it. In the summary and conclusions in the middle of the book, he talks about to be cut off from family places a person in a position of increased vulnerability to life's problems. And I think that is a family systems notion, that if you are emotionally cut off, you tend to then continue with a distortion in your perception, in your emotions, and things like that. Now, I understand that distortion of perception or that vulnerability to life problems might be more preferable than to be in contact with a narcissist who is malignant and toxic. And so we'll take the distortion and those kinds of things and deal with those versus what we're going to get from the malignant narcissist. But family therapists tend to be hesitant about, oh, just cut off with them. Oh, just get them out of your life. Oh, just don't talk to them anymore. Because we know it has an effect on us. It has an impact on us. And so we don't want to cause these kinds of, for example, future cutoffs in ourselves and in other people. Just like if there are triangles in a family of origin, for example, if you're in a triangle with mom and dad and you're triangulated in, guess what's going to happen when you become an adult if those aren't resolved? You end up getting into triangles when you're an adult and get caught and stuck in those. Or you might have an affair because that's a triangle. Wife, husband, affair partner. Guess what? Guess where original triangles happened? In the family of origin. That's where we had our original triangles that haven't been resolved. And then we end up having affairs and other triangles when we get older. Or I have other couples that I work with in which there was a triangle between mom, dad, and son. Son gets married. Son stays in the triangle with mom. Now we have mom, son, and his wife. And guess what? We now have a struggle between mom, son, and wife. And so that triangle continues. If we want to resist those triangles so we won't have those things happening in the future. Cutoffs, emotional or immature emotional cutoffs, if we do those, then we will be more vulnerable to cutoffs in the future. We might be more vulnerable to other life problems and distortions or neurotic thinking or feelings because of those cutoffs. And so a marriage and family therapist would be aware of that and go, so let's not just be hasty about cutting off people, because I hear people all the time going, oh, well, just leave them in the dirt. Well, hold on. They may need to be left there. I understand. But let's take care of you, and let's make sure that we do things that make the least amount of problems for the future. And I think that's a good and wise choice to make. And that's why I'm always cautious, and I've always been kind of cautious about just going no contact. Though I do believe no contact is necessary. There are some situations in which I really think it can be very difficult to heal or to grow without the no contact. I think it can be really, really tough in situations, in families, etc. Signs you need to go no contact with your family. One is, I was trying to, this is by Osania Tepfernhart, Tepfenhart, Ossiana, Osania. And I like what she wrote in the research. I was doing this and I found this where she was giving those kind of criteria, and they are very good criteria. One is your family abuses you physically, verbally, or sexually. And again, I think it's very important that it is abuse. So we have to make sure we know, well, are they abusing us, or is mom just an old cranky person? Let me take a look. I wanted to check let's see. I said, question, Marlene has a question about future faking. Explain future faking. Do you mean somebody making promises they're not going to keep? Somebody fakes about the future, about what they're going to do? I'm not sure I know exactly the meaning of that. It may be a jargon term that's used. Their promises for future for anything, A narcissist consistent about future faking. I don't know. Someone would have to write that down and explain that to me, because I'm not sure how to answer that. So your family abuses you physically, verbally, or sexually. And that if you're in those situations where you're experiencing abuse is not okay by anyone, by any family member, by any family member, by any other person, by a boss, by anybody. abuse is not appropriate. If you have made it clear that you're not going to accept that and that it should stop, and they refuse to do that, then you have some real grounds and reasons that I'm going to have to go no contact. And actually, what I think also about no contact, it's something that other people force me to do. It's not something I want to do, it's something other people are forcing me to do. I have made my request. I don't want to be abused sexually, verbally, emotionally, and I would like you to stop that. And if you don't, I won't have any other choice. There won't be any other choices for me to make. Your family abandoned you and now they want you back. People who have been abandoned by their families often struggle with abandonment issues and have trouble trusting others as a result. If they did this to you, then decided they want you back now that you are successful or married and have kids and whatever, don't give in. While it may feel nice to think they want you as their family now, the truth is they've already shown their colors. And I'm not sure you want to give them a second chance at hurting you again. Now, unless you have some very good evidence that there has been change in the family. And what I think of is change that is deep change. Not just, oh, we didn't want you then, now we want you now. Well, you can change that decision anytime. You can make that decision, and you might change back to, oh, we don't want you now again. But if you've seen that somebody has grown, become wiser, is humble, is remorseful, and is mature, then you might want to stick your toe into the water and see how that might go. But if you're not seeing that kind of evidence, then I would be very cautious about, you didn't want me then, but you want me now. Maybe you just need to move on to someone else's life and put your energy into them. There's financial abuse involved. And I find many times financial abuse can be really severe by families, by spouses, by friends, by siblings, parents. I have families now, and I have a number of adult children of narcissists that I work with, many of them, and they are just being drained dry financially. And that's what they are expected to do. And if you don't do it, then we will not love you, we will not like you, and those kinds of issues. And it's very, very unfortunate, very painful, and it's sometimes difficult to get unpretzeled with, where we get unpretzeled. And again, I know of folks who are paying for a house for their sister, for their mother, bought a new house for their father, and it's a mess. And it's a total mess. No, everybody's under functioning but the one child. They are the overfunctioner and everybody else is living off her. And that's been going on since she was a child. And it's very painful, and she is working through those issues, and she has begun to face those. And there are changes that have already taken place. She's changed jobs to get away from a narcissistic boss and a very unhealthy work environment. She's starting to turn her life around, and now she knows she needs to face her family of origin and how she's functioned in an over-functioning way. And guess what? She's had 2 or 3, 4 boyfriends, and guess what she's done with all of them? She takes care of all of them and worries about all of them. The one who is an alcoholic doesn't believe he's an alcoholic. He says, I'm going to quit drinking because I want to have you back. I'm just going to quit drinking. Well, do you go to AA? Do you believe in an alcoholic? No, I'm not. I just want you back, until he relapses again, starts feeling suicidal, and then drags her back into his life again to save him. And that's very common for people to struggle with. She's now beginning to release those tangled webs that have been pulling her down for years. And financial abuse has been a common one. And again, helping someone in the family, if you want to help someone, you can. I have helped people in my family, but helping them and financial abuse are two different things. Number one, love for me is not dependent upon whether I help you or not, nor is my personhood at question. In other words, if I don't or cannot help you, that won't change how you feel about me. If it does, then I really don't want to help you, because that's not going to be a good thing. Can you love me whether I help you or not? And so I think financial abuse is different than helping other people. Helping comes out of our sense of self and self-differentiation. And helping is intentional. Allowing financial abuse is neurotic. It's unconscious. It's something we feel forced to have to endure. And so if family members, husbands, wives, children, whoever they are abusing us financially, we really need to stop and get control of our lives, and stop and get a control of that. We may need to grieve the loss. Well, if I stop taking care of my under-functioning daughter, who can't keep a job, who won't go out and look for a job, she keeps living in her car, then she wants me to take her back, but I've helped her in 1,000 different ways, that then I'm afraid I will lose her, she won't love you. Well, let me help you with that fear. You've already lost her, and she probably is not loving you now. So it's not going to happen, it's already happening. If you could face that, you might help stop your enabling of her, and she might have a chance of growing up. And so that could make for a relationship or a mature relationship in the future, but not until she grows up. So financial abuse, we may have to cut off if they will not. No different than what do you do with an addict or an alcoholic who keeps wanting you to give them money? Oh, we can't pay the rent this month. Jerry, can you help me out? Well, I know why you can't pay the rent, because you've been using cocaine. I know why you need money to fix your car, because you spend way too much money on alcohol. So I'm not going to fall for those tricks when someone is addicted or is under functioning. I'm not going to fall for that because I think there's lots of opportunities. The other thing, and especially with parents, because many times kids feel obligated to take care of their parents, and in the when we feel obligated to take care of parents, and there's some, we have, honor your father and your mother, one of the fourth commandments, and when we have those kinds of training that we have had, where we should take care of our parents and we're looked down upon if we don't, then it can feel very, what am I going to do with my parent who's not functioning as they should, and they are under functioning? Well, I just have to take care of them the rest of their lives. Well, you can, Or you can decide that they have made their choices for decades and they have gotten to this horrible position that it's very difficult for you to dig them out of this. Then what they may need to do is to rely upon the state. And then we need to get the state involved with housing, food stamps, whatever they need to do, rather than me just paying all their bills. We may need to rely on a bigger pot than just me. And so I think that I'm going to talk about in the video also how we feel obligated to do those things and feel guilty. There is a great book that is entitled, I just recommended it today, When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. It's a great book. I might recommend it to anyone. It might help you to say no and not feel as guilty. Because that's where, I know for me, my life was run by guilt. That's how I decided everything. What would create the least amount of guilt? And as a result of that, I would make my decision from there. Well, those aren't good decisions when you make them what would create the least amount of guilt. And I know there are many people who have gotten to a place where they don't feel that pull anymore, and where they feel like, hey, I don't get used in that way anymore. Be careful about your sister and brothers of humanity who are still learning and still working their way out of being used and abused by others in their family and friends, etc. Because I read a lot of comments on my videos sometimes, and I have a video channel, Jerry Wise Relationship Systems, and it has about 160 videos on it. And I read comments and they say, well, why do you just let them abuse you like that? That's ridiculous. You should just stop that. I don't think they understand how difficult a process that can be. It's not just a simple turning of a switch. Now, they maybe have gotten to that place where they don't care, but other people are very caught in that. And I remember the intense power of guilt. I mean, the intense power of guilt. And so I appreciate when other people have a difficult time and they say, boy, I'm just not ready to tell them to go, leave me alone and I don't care what happens to you. I can understand how difficult that would be. So I hope we will be patient with others and understand it's not easy to just make those choices. And I hear a lot of people are kind of intolerant of that and kind of judge. Well, I would just tell them to screw off. Why even let them bother you? Well, because they've had years of learning to do that. And so things aren't right in here to make that detachment yet. They're learning to detach. So we want to be patient with others when it's harder. It's it's always easy to see, from where you're at, how someone else should be. Because you're more objective. It doesn't bother you. Yeah, but when you were in their position, it was much more difficult to see. So we want to be careful and we want to be patient with other pilgrims on the road to recovery. And not just say, well, why do you let that bother you? Tell them no. Tell them you're not going to give them that money. Hey, it's a big deal to say, no, I'm not going to give you that money, when you have been groomed all of your life to take care of everybody. And if you don't, you're nobody. And so we want to be real careful about judging other people. Signs you need to go no contact with your family. They show no remorse when you tell them that they hurt you or that you felt hurt. And again, if someone has no remorse, if someone doesn't care, and it's then I think that's a time of going, wait a minute, you're not having you it I and I remember a client who had said it was a good statement too. The She had said something to her sister and said, "Oh, I know." She was going to confront somebody. I know. She was going to confront her brother, no, her sister about what her ex-husband had done to her when she was a child. And she had never shared that. And we were role playing what her sister would say. And her sister had been in denial about this very unhealthy ex-husband that had sexually was inappropriate with her younger, very much younger sister. And the role play, the sister who was being told, who was the ex-wife, would have said, "Well, you know, I hear what you're saying, but no one else has said that of all of our siblings." And it's like, well, what does it matter that no other sister or no other sibling, though she knew another sister had been involved? So there was another sister. She just wasn't going to tell her other sister because she didn't feel that was for her to tell. But it's like, no, you don't understand. Are you saying because no one else has complained that you shouldn't believe me? And by the way, the sister who was abused, she's now 50 years old or whatever. And it's like, there'd be no reason for me to lie to you about this. And I remember I have lived in fear of that ex-husband ever since. And I have kept it as a family secret. And mom said, don't ever tell you about it because it would cause all kinds of problems. And again, if the sister she's telling doesn't care about whether that hurts you or not, then that's a real problem. No, that really does hurt me. I do expect you to believe me. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's a pleasant thought, but I do expect to be believed. I don't think, because I have no reason to lie to you. I gain nothing by telling you this information other than I don't hold it as a secret any longer. And that is a benefit to me. So again, and if people have hurt you, or if parents hurt you or make fun of you or shame you, criticize you, tell you you're so stupid for this or so dumb for that, or I never thought you could be anything. Yes, this younger sister was abused by the older sister's ex-husband when they were married. But it could never come out because mom didn't want it known because it was going to blow up everything. And so with when we are treated very badly, and if you say, "Hey, that really hurt," and people don't care, now why am I staying in contact with them if they don't really, they don't really. What is this love we call in our family? I mean, love is, or family means you can shame and criticize a family member, hurt them tremendously, but not feel remorse. That's what we find happens in families that are not loving, don't know a lot about loving, because love means it matters that you felt hurt. That's what love means. I mean, in my mind, that would be a part of love. And so if they're not doing that, then, do they really love me, or are we just, held together by our roles? It's not love, it's just we're held together because we have these roles of being family members and we happen to share DNA. And for many families, that is the truth. That is what family life is. And it's very painful when it's like that. And society says you just need to put up with that. You just need to put up with that. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. That's often what society will say. Even therapists, even pastors, even will tell you there's something wrong with you. Well, that's your mother. That's your father. And it's like, yeah, but did you hear what I said? My father said? It's like, no, but he's still your father. I'm sure he loves you. Well, I don't know if you're clairvoyant or not, but I'm not sure you know that. You are assuming that, and that's very unfortunate that you are assuming that, because I'm starting to understand he just might not love me. Do you think that's possible, Pastor? And do you think that's possible? And the pastor would probably say, well, I think God is love, and I'm sure your mom and dad, even though they have all those faults, love you. Well, you're talking about a realm of normalcy that is not my family. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're talking about that realm of normalcy. And also, I don't agree with you in how you interpret that commandment of honoring your father and your mother, because there's some other commandments. And honoring, it also says to love God and honor God first. And that and if your parents aren't doing that, then is it required that you honor them? Do we take that commandment out of context? Because the commandment was based on a consistent working of all of the commandments. If they loved God, then you honor them for their wisdom and experience, etc., and their love. It's not, how do you, and just as Moogie Starr says, honoring parents who are honorable. Exactly. And also, what about the verses that says love your children and and don't provoke them to anger and all kinds of things? And there's all kind of verses like that. What do we do with parents who do that? Many people don't realize there's some of those other verses that call parents to to a higher standard, and how they should not provoke their children. But parents who provoke their children, we should honor them? Ooh, that just doesn't feel, that doesn't feel logical. And I can't see God up there going, now I know your parents are abusing you, but I'm sending the Holy Spirit to tell you, you need to put up with it. I don't know a God like that. Now maybe you do. I can't speak for everybody, and I it's above my pay grade. I don't know everything about what happens in the heavens. So, but that's just hard for me to. That if I can figure it out, I can't imagine God not figuring it out. That's where I have some trouble. Another reason to go no contact, as Oceana has said, is that your family has wrecked your marriage. And I think I've got some couples now that they could really do well if they would just go no contact with their in-laws. It probably would be they would probably have a happier marriage, healthier marriage, better family life with their children, and that I really think it could be a help to do that. And again, when we're adults, parents are not required. And I think that there was a question, and I didn't want to miss that question. I saw there was, how consistent are narcissists with future faking? I'd say, narcissists tend to live in the future many times. And now I don't know that every narcissist would be their, main way they modus operandi, but I would say promises and faking about the future, making promises, talking about how wonderful things are going to be, talking about, oh yes, this is going to happen and I'm going to do this and this is going to be wonderful. And for a narcissist, it's always going to be, going to be, going to be. The problem is it just never is. It's always going to be, and that's unfortunate. And I think there is a lot of future faking going on, not only for narcissists, but some other folks with some personality issues too. That I'm looking for what are you doing now, and not what are you promising for the future. I'm not a big one on promises and on future. I'm not, and I guess I worked with addictions enough that when someone tells me they're promising me they're not going to drink, I always feel discouraged and disappointed because I don't see that as recovery. And that I know with that approach, you're not going to stop drinking. And I think, Guy and Jackie, yeah, I think, they're liars. They will tell you anything. Dream sellers. They are dream sellers. They're always selling dreams. I think many times narcissists are dream sellers. And, and if we want to buy the dreams, we can, but when somebody's trying to sell me a dream, I usually go, it's probably too good to be true. And that with addictions, when somebody says, oh, well, I'm not ever going to use cocaine again, then I'm going, well, that means you probably will, because you're making a promise not to. And we don't recover by promises. We recover one day at a time and working a program of recovery, not working a program of promises. Promises is not how we change and not how we become adults. And I tell people, even if someone's had an affair, which is very serious, and someone has an affair and they go, well, I'm going to promise my wife I will never do it again. And I will say, please don't do that. Please don't promise your wife you'll never do it again. I really don't think that's going to help. First of all, she's not going to believe you. Second of all, I don't think you can keep that promise. Why don't you promise her something you can keep? Like, I promise you I will work on me. I will work to make you first in my life and not second. And I will get the healing that I need day to day. Now that's a promise you can promise her. But this other promise of, I just think that's not even gonna, that will probably just slide right off the wall. It's not gonna stick. So a family can wreck a marriage, and if and we have to choose, marriage versus family. Marriage must come first. Am I against family? No, I think family can be wonderful and we can love our family members. But, it's marriage is number one. If marriage is number one, if marriage is not number one, it's going to be, that is going to be a love buster. It can't be in-laws, it can't be siblings, it can't be friends, marriage has to be number one. Or as Harley says in his book, Love Busters, you're just deteriorating the romantic love. that way, and it will only get worse, and then you will end up in a bad situation later. And that's usually what happens. Another thing Osania says is therapists have told you to go no contact. Maybe a psychiatrist, maybe a healing professional. And again, that may not be common that you will hear that from therapists, but sometimes a professional or a pastor will say, you just have to say no. And if someone has told you that, if they don't have a dog in the race, and they're not biased in some way, then you may want to take that seriously. That, somebody has told me I need to go no contact. Maybe there's something to that. Your family's love is conditional. I mean, really conditional. Now, I think of love, conditional love, as, what's the term? A oxymoron. Conditional love? Then is it love if it's conditional? It's transactional. Well, I don't consider that really love. So if somebody has love is conditional, then, does your family only act like they love you if you're doing exactly what they tell you to do? Do they tell you what career to pick, who to date, what to wear, knowing that they can just withdraw affection if you refuse them? If so, there's some bad news you need to hear. Your family's love is conditional. Unlike normal families that show unconditional love, conditional love means that they don't really care about what you want out of life. It means they don't really care about you, and that they only care about what you can do for their image, for their opinions, for their beliefs, for their church, for how they seem to other people. Then again, you may need to go no contact with them so that you can live life on your terms, which I think is very important, to live life on your terms. Because they're not going to want you to live life on your terms. They'll want you to live life on their terms. Another reason or need to go no contact, if your family is in a religion that acts cult-like and you want out. Can you please tell us the name of the book again? Is that the book about if I say no, I feel guilty? If I say no, I feel guilty. Is that the book you were talking about, Guy and Jackie? I just wanted to check. Maybe you can let me know. I think that's... and then, or is it the Emotional Cutoff book by Peter Teitelman? That was the other book I had mentioned. Emotional Cutoff by Peter Teitelman. That's not a cheap book. It's expensive, and it tends to be written for clinicians. But I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. And if you could just read slowly and go through it, I think you can learn a lot. So your family's love is conditional. If it's conditional, why are you staying in it if it's conditional? And I've asked people, if you have children and your grandparents only practice conditional love, is that what you want for your children? Is that, I don't want to take them away from their grandparents. Well, I don't want you taking them away from their grandparents either. But what if your grandparents only practice conditional love? Then it becomes a problem. That's not a simple a formulation. And then we get into families in a religious cult, and I've had a number of people who have family members and families have been in religious cults and very cult-like churches, and they've decided not to go to that church. And then every time they show up with the family always pressures them to go to the church. You're making us unhappy. God's not happy with you. You're going to go to hell. Why don't you go to church with us? And they just feel the need to evangelize them all over again. And again, it's not an acceptance. It's, I've got to guilt you in and shame you into coming back to our cult-like church. Well, guys, if you're already choosing them and choosing the cult-like church over your family, then I don't know how we're going to have much of a family. Then you just need to go be a family with that church. I mean, I guess that's what you need to do. Another reason for no contact is you can't remember a discussion with your family that didn't result in your tears. If we're crying every time we have an interaction with our family, if we come back and every time we're miserable, then maybe no contact is a good choice. I'm not saying no contact is easy. It takes a lot of grief work. It takes a lot of patience. There's yearnings and feelings to want to reconnect again. There's all kinds of process that goes through with that decision to no contact. But again, if all we have is a horrible interaction with our family every time we're with them, life is short. I mean, do I want to do that for 20 years and say, well, I'm still in connected with my family. I hate every minute of it, but I'm still in contact with them. Eek. Let me try to get through these here because we're coming down to the end of our time. You need to go no contact with your family if you live in fear, not knowing. And Gilligan, I'll answer your question here in just a second. I did read that. If you're in fear, if you live in fear, not knowing how your family will behave from one day to the next. And again, that's a very good reason. If they are so chaotic, you live in fear, you never know what's going to happen, and it's very, very uncomfortable and abusive in that way, then, that's too much of an emotional price for family interaction. Family interaction should be positive. Multiple people have told you that they think your family is very toxic. If you've talked with other people and other people are saying, my gosh, what is wrong with your family? Then you may want to listen up to them and consider that. Your relationship with your family is all about one person, or it's all about everyone but you. And then you might want to look at possibly going no contact, because it's either all about one person or it's all about everyone, and that everyone does not include you. That's very abusive, bullying, toxic, and unhealthy. And no one else is seeing it. No one else is going to change it. That's very, very painful. If you're put last, or you have to tiptoe all the time around your parents, and you have to sacrifice your happiness for them, then maybe it's time to cut that contact. They did something unforgivable. Killed your pet, sold your favorite item, chose a total stranger over you. Those kind of, they clearly didn't care enough to be a decent human being with you. So why should you continue to stay in contact with them after those kinds of horrible choices that they made? Or they chose an abusive, narcissistic husband that you divorced over you. That would be kind of an unforgivable type of act, so to speak, or it would be a very destructive act. They regularly use no-win mind games to manipulate you and control you. This is emotional abuse. They gaslight you. They give you the silent treatment back. I think, can you hear me and see me now? I had a little buffering. that was going on. Um, Successfully connect, chat disconnected. Okay, you can see me. Okay, so if we get into no-win mind games and manipulating you, your family puts you in a horrible situations. Your parents raised you in a drug den. They have put you in serious physical danger. They purposely gotten you fired. They've interfered with your relationships in a serious way. And again, they might have you in a cult-like church in which there was abuse, sexual abuse, or other things that they pursued. I think also this one sister who was confronting the other sister, mom did not protect the youngest sister from the daughter's husband. And I think that's what's very unfortunate. And that put the daughter in danger. Now, I wanted to check, Gilligan, you had a question. Oh, question. Should I first have a conversation with them about why I'm going no contact or just go no contact? Well, there's different theories of thought about that. Should I tell someone or should I not? If things are so bad that you have to go no contact, my feeling is I'm not sure it matters either way. So I don't know that you can lose. You can tell them or you can not tell them. But if things are that bad that you need to go no contact, but much like, let's say someone would ask me, I want to divorce my husband. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't treat me right. We've been married for 25, 30 years. He's getting worse. He's drinking more. I don't want to live this way. He doesn't want to go to counseling. He doesn't want to get help. I've tried and tried and tried every way I could. Now, should I tell him why I want a divorce? Well, the thing is, you've probably been telling him why you want a divorce for the last 25 or 30 years. So you've already been telling him that, my hunch is. Now, there's nothing wrong with informing him that you are going to be getting a divorce. And then if he asks why, I would probably say, for me, we have moved past the why. We have moved past the why. And probably since I'm wanting a divorce at this time, which I did want to give you a notice about, that I will be filing for divorce, but we're past the why. You may want to ask your own therapist about that, but I'm not sure I'm the right person to give you that information since now we are no longer going to be married. And that if I do tell you the why, it will only bring up the arguments and the perspectives that we don't agree on. So I'm just going to dredge up the problems again by telling you the why. So it's not something that's necessarily going to give closure. Or you can say, another thing you can say is, how about we discuss that 2 years after our divorce? And I'll tell you the why. But let's do that then, because then we will be more objective and a lot less caught up in this right now. What I want you to know is I'm going to be divorcing you. And the why is, if you really want to know what my why is, because it is my preference. And if your mom and dad, if you're telling your parents, I'm going to choose to go no contact and I'd rather not have contact with you. Well, why? Why? What have we done? Well, I can tell you the best why. It is my choice. It is my preference. And most people don't know there's power in having a preference because it's my preference. It's my choice. I don't have to tell you why. it is just what I prefer. And that the I think the with telling them it's my preference, then again you're not getting into all the, because the first thing you say, if you tell them the reasons, they're going to challenge you, disagree with you, try to persuade you out of what you're thinking. And it's better to say, it's given everything I've known for the last 35 years, it is my preference to go no contact. And so that's how I might like to share that with someone if I was going to tell them. Other people are so toxic in our lives, we may just want to go no contact without any notice. But again, I think if things have gotten so bad that there is no, we need to go no contact, then it's probably not going to make a big difference either way, whether you give notice or don't give notice. Now, someone was asking, how should a YouTube viewer handle, I think, is this Emily's question? How should a YouTube viewer handle a YouTube content creator who is a licensed psychologist and academic with a drama channel which is filled with narcissistic abuse, flying monkeys, and smear campaigns? Is there an ethical code of contact with free time? Well, I mean, a content creator, and again, are they doing, I mean, we do have freedom of speech, in our country. That is a right that we have. I think if someone is practicing or doing something within their license and they're doing all of these things, then that's a problem. Like if you're teaching or training something using your background, then you need to be much more careful about how you do that. Now, if it's on their own free time, it still is kind of ethically and morally a problem. It may not be illegal, everybody has a right to their own free speech, but it still could be ethical and moral. And I mean, someone could, you can always make a complaint that this person is known to be a licensed psychologist, and you can contact the the board in their state, wherever they're at, who their licensing, psychology degree state, where they're at, and go, this is just really problematic and troubling for me that someone in this profession is fine with this kind of material. It just really seems out of character for something like that. Now, again, like Emily, if she's saying, if she's just doing it for fun, she is teaching, but then says, this is not my job. I am just doing this for fun. It's pretty outrageous. There's no avenue on YouTube for this. I don't know. I'd have to see what she is doing. Why is she doing it for fun? I mean, is it entertainment? I mean, comedians say a lot of things I don't like many times, but it's funny. They're doing it to be funny. And so I don't know what she's saying. I guess it would be interesting to know what, and Emily, it'd be interesting. I wouldn't mind seeing, rather than putting it up there, or maybe you have already, you could email me that, again, just because you're a psychologist doesn't mean you don't have issues, and it doesn't mean you don't have personality issues. So just because you're in the mental health field doesn't mean everything's all cool. But if you wanted to send me that link to whatever she's doing, I'd be interested to see how she's approaching these things. Because I thought about doing some things that were humorous or fun, but I'm not sure I would be celebrating, and my email address is jerrywise, the number 5, at gmail.com. You can also find me at Jerry Wise Relationship Systems on YouTube and on Facebook. I hope you will follow me there and subscribe there. I do want to tell everyone I'm so grateful that you are all here with me tonight. I hope tonight was a help for you in some ways. I'm sorry we had our technical problems at the beginning. You guys are really kind to listen to me for such a long time and be patient. And I hope that tonight has been a good thing. And I am just so grateful that I have the opportunity to pay back for free. I'm also on Twitter, I think, to pay back for free the help that people have given me and shown me love, acceptance, forgiveness, family systems, understanding about life, and also picking me up when I was very down in life. And so I am grateful for that, and I want to thank you all for watching tonight. I hope you'll tune in the next time. It probably will be Mark and Renda, who'll be talking with you, and I'll be doing a video on again, emotional cutoff, going no contact, silent treatment, things like that. So we keep those very clear, so that we can be healthy and self-differentiated, which will help our recovery. Thank you all, and you have a great night. And